Welcome back. In this class, we will see a new data structure, tuples. Tuples are ordered, iterable, and immutable objects in Python. We will shortly see what immutable means. Tuples are faster and more memory efficient than lists. So whenever we can store an object as a tuple, we should use tuples instead of lists. It becomes especially important when we want to store large amounts of data in our program. If we can store the data as a tuple, we should prefer to use tuples over lists. So first, let's look at some examples of how to create a new tuple. To create a new tuple, you can use the syntax in line 12. I show you how to create an empty tuple. The variable name is empty underscore tuple. On the right hand side, we simply have an opening and a closing parenthesis. Since it's empty, it doesn't contain any element. In line 13, I'm printing this variable empty underscore tuple and its type. So first, let's execute the program and check what will be displayed. Notice since it's empty, we have nothing within the parenthesis. We only have an opening and closing parenthesis. And the type of this variable empty underscore tuple is a class. So tuple is implemented as a class in Python, and empty underscore tuple is an object or an instance of this class tuple. Now next, let's see what happens when we declare a variable using this following syntax. Here the name of the variable is not a tuple. Hopefully this should already give you a hint as to what will come next. On the right hand side, I'm using opening and closing parenthesis, and within parenthesis I'm storing an object which is a string. So now when we print this variable not a tuple and its type, let's see what will be the output that's displayed. Notice first the type is not a tuple, it's a string. And since it's not a tuple, we are not seeing an opening and closing parenthesis on the display. We simply see cat is of type class string. Now the reason why this is a string and not a tuple is because tuples are created when we have a comma in our code, and tuples are not created when we simply create opening and closing parentheses. So a common mistake that most students make is to think that if we store an element within parentheses, the element is stored as a tuple, which is wrong. To create a new tuple, you need to at least have a single comma, and it's the comma that makes a tuple and not parentheses. So now in line 21, I'm creating a new variable called now a tuple, and this time notice there is an additional comma. So since there is only one element, I'm simply putting a comma, and after comma there are no more elements. So this should now create now underscore a underscore tuple as a tuple. So it's now an instance or an object of type tuple. And notice also it's displayed now with opening and closing parentheses. So this is the first and most important thing to remember with tuples. Tuples again are not created using parentheses. Comma is the one that makes a tuple and not parentheses. Now the next example shows this more clearly. So here I'm creating a tuple. On the right hand side we have two elements. The first item is Saturday, both of them are strings. The second item is Sunday, and they are separated using a comma. So on the left hand side we have a variable named weekend. So weekend now will be an object of type tuple, and it contains two elements, Saturday and Sunday. So when we print weekend in the next line, we should see Saturday comma Sunday is the weekend. So this again reinforces that it's comma that is important to make a tuple and not parentheses. Now tuples support indexing, slicing, length, in, and plus operator that we saw with lists. So most of these operators that work with lists will also work with tuples. So let's look at each of these with an example. First, I'm using the square brackets operator to access an element. of this tuple. So here I want to access the first element of the tuple weekend and print the first day of the weekend is Saturday. So let's see what will be the print. Now notice print is first day of the weekend is Saturday and Saturday is in single quotes. So I'm using double quotes to create this string literal within which I'm using single quotes to quote the string Saturday. Okay, next we can use the in keyword to check whether an element is part of the tuple or not. If it's part of the tuple, this particular expression will return a true. If it's not part of the tuple, it will return a false. So since Sunday is part of the tuple weekend, we should see Sunday is a weekend. The statement Sunday is a weekend should be true. Okay, so similarly, Monday is not a weekend. So now not in is the operator that we can use to check whether an item is not part of the tuple. Since Monday is not part of weekend, we should again get true for this statement. Okay, now notice Monday is not a weekend is still true. So this statement is again true. So both in and not in operators can be used with tuples. Now I'm creating a new tuple weekday, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So there are 5 elements in this tuple, and I'm printing it again in the next line. And now this example shows us how to use slicing with tuples. So here I want to print a week begins with Monday and Tuesday. To do that, we can access the first 2 elements of the tuple using slicing. So weekday of 0:2 will give us the first 2 elements of the tuple. And len of weekday should simply return 5, which is the number of elements that is stored in the tuple. So a weekday again begins with Monday, Tuesday, and number of weekdays is equal to 5. Now we can use the plus operator to concatenate or join 2 tuples and create a new tuple. Here days is a new tuple. It is created by joining 2 tuples weekday and weekend. So days of the week should be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So when we print days of the week, we should see all the days. So far, tuples appear to be the same as lists. So you may be wondering what's the difference between tuples and lists. Hopefully by the end of this class, it should be clear what is the most important difference. Now again, tuples can store elements of different types. Tuples store elements again as references similar to lists. So we can mix elements of different types. And line 44 shows you an example of storing integers and strings as part of this tuple weekday. Okay, so notice again, we can store elements of different types in a tuple, similar to lists. Now, in the first class, we saw how to swap 2 variables using the multiple assignment operator. So remember or recollect, I have 2 variables A and B. A is initialized to capital A, B is initialized to capital B, and I can use this multiple assignment statement to swap A and B. Now let's see how this particular piece of code was actually working. The first thing that we need to recollect is this statement executes from the right hand side of the assignment operator. On the right hand side of the assignment operator, first we have B, A. So B, A creates a new tuple, and once this new tuple is created, we will then assign the elements of the tuple by unpacking it. So on the left hand side, since we have 2 variables, we will unpack the new tuple and store the first element of the tuple in variable A and the second element of the tuple in variable B. Now the tuple is created by using the order B, A, which means the first element of the tuple is B, second element of the tuple is A. And again, tuples store references to objects and not copies. So the first element of tuple has a reference to variable B. The second element of tuple has a reference to variable A. Now, when we do this assignment, the unpacking will unpack the first element of the tuple, which is B, to A, and it will unpack the second element of the tuple, which is A, to variable B. So this is the reason why the swap works. So when we execute this line and print variables A, comma B after swapping, notice before swap it's AB, after swap it's BA. So we can use the simple one line statement to swap two variables, and it only works because Python creates the right hand side as a tuple and it unpacks it when the assignment is executed. Now, the most important thing with tuples, the most important distinguishing factor between tuples and lists are tuples. So once we create a tuple, that is, once we add elements to a tuple, we can only access it using the square brackets operator, and we cannot modify it or change the content by assigning a new value to it. So here I'm showing you a new syntax. The syntax is going to show you how to handle code which can potentially cause a runtime exception. So here we know that, or I know that when I try to access an element of a tuple and try to modify its value, Python will throw a runtime exception. Therefore, I am writing this code within a try block. So the syntax is as follows. First, we write try followed by a colon, and within the body, which is again similar to all loops and conditions where you need to indent the code. So I have one level of indentation here, and I'm trying to access the last element of the tuple using the -1 index and modifying it to Sunday with lowercase s. Now notice this will give us a type error, which is a runtime exception. So to handle this runtime exception, we can write an except block. So except type error will have code that should be executed when this particular error is raised. So here, since I know that type error is the error that will be raised when we try to modify an element of a tuple, I'm handling that particular exception, and within the body of the exception, I'm simply printing that this particular syntax will cause an error, and the error message can be accessed using this variable e. So syntax except type error as e will give us the original error message that Python will throw, and we can also use that original error message to inform the user why this particular piece of code fails. So let's first try and run the code. So notice when I continue, first Python tries to execute this code. If the code works, it will not go to the except block. If the code fails, it should go to the except block. So let's see what happens. And let's also go to the watch window and see what will be weekend. Notice weekend is currently Saturday, Sunday. Both Saturday and Sunday has an uppercase S. If this succeeds, then the second element should change. Now notice it did not change, which means this failed. And since it failed, it also goes to the except block. Now let's see what will be the error message. We'll go back here and notice error colon weekend of in square brackets -1 is equal to Sunday throws an exception, and the exception says that tuple object does not support item assignment. So the immutable characteristic of tuple means that once we store an item within tuple, we cannot modify or change it. We can only read or access it using the square brackets operator. We can use slicing to read multiple elements stored within a tuple, but we cannot modify or change it using the assignment operator. So whenever we want to store large amount of data in our program that we will not modify, so suppose we load some data and we will compute something on this data, and we will not change or modify the original data, then we can store the data as a tuple instead of a list. Tuples are faster and more memory efficient, so we should use tuples instead of lists to store such data. Now again, all the inbuilt methods like append, push, append, pop, and remove, these uh, inbuilt methods are not supported in tuple. It's only supported in list. It's not supported in tuple because we're not allowed to change or modify the tuple once we create it. So this concludes the topic on tuples. Next time we will begin with the new data structure dictionary, and hopefully once we complete dictionary and sets, we will be able to look at more Python programs that uses these data structures to solve practical problems. Thank you.